I find past life healings to be so amazing. And what I often suggest to people is first, when they're coming up against something in their lives that doesn't quite make sense, first you want to work on the emotional layer around it. And then you can start seeing if there's any patterns in your life. Maybe there's something you learned in your childhood. Maybe there's something that was passed down from your ancestors.
Hello, and today's episode I am so excited to bring to you, to me, to us, Christina Brinkley. Christina Brinkley has been on a couple of times before, and I just absolutely love her. And her talents and her gifts are extraordinary. And for me, just collectively what the doctor ordered. And speaking of what the doctor ordered, she volunteered, and I happily accepted. She graciously volunteered to do a soul clearing. She works with subtle energy, and she offered to do this to me, for me. And today that's what we're going to talk about. So if this doesn't quite make sense yet, hang tight. We're going to explain, she's going to explain what this is, what this means. But without further ado, knowing more details to come, welcome back, Christina.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure. So if you would, can you explain a little bit what you offered to do for me? And that'll get the ball rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you listen to the last podcast that we had recorded together, you had mentioned, we were talking about past lives. I do, in my healing work, I do a variety of type of healings. I do ancestral, I do inner child, I work with the shadow. I work with all types of layers of our awareness to help break up patterns and bring people into their highest path. And so one of the things that I was wanting to talk about was just focusing on past lives and how integrating aspects of your past life into when your soul splits, and sometimes your soul can split or fragment off and get stuck in a past life. And then that piece of you is looping in an experience. Mm-hmm. And if you are sensitive enough, you might be feeling that experience and not understand why. So if you had a traumatic experience in a past life and you're feeling it in this life, but there's no reason for you to feel it. And you brought up how sometimes, or one day you were driving across a bridge and you suddenly felt terrified, afraid. I'm not sure.
Biggest
I can't remember.
Panic attack of my life in 2000. And it has stayed with me ever since. And I've gone through EMDR. I've gone through counseling. I've even had psychics tell me, that I've had past lives on a bridge. And it's extended onto driving on the highway, feeling the sense of, oh my gosh, if I can't get off, and what if I have a panic attack? And it's just been a real source of suffering in my life. And what's so interesting is in interviewing people and reading about people and following people, these past life traumas really are the source that, unless it's cleared, we could do all the psychotherapy in the world, but it's not really touching that loop you're talking about.
Yes, I find past life healings to be so amazing. And what I often suggest to people is first, when they're coming up against something in their lives that doesn't quite make sense, first you want to work on the emotional layer around it. Mm-hmm. And then you can start seeing if there's any patterns in your life. Maybe there's something you learned in your childhood. Maybe there's something that was passed down from your ancestors. But to me, like, the kind of thing you look at when nothing else seems to be working is the past life. Like, that tends to be where something is often hidden. And when it's something so sudden that doesn't make any sense, like just one day driving over a bridge and then not being able to do it again.
Yes.
Or comfortably doing it again.
That's right. Because I've done it again. It's just hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Just suffering through it. Mm-hmm. I think that to me was like, as soon as I heard you say that, I was like, oh, I'm very curious if there's some, there's more to your, that's like that to me reads as like a past life pattern. Um, Now, nothing's ever super clean cut. I'm sure there's aspects of this past life pattern that has been sort of entangled with something maybe your parents said while you were a child driving over a bridge, or, there's like things that we collect. So
Yes.
it's not like, it's not ever going to be like, this is the thing, this is the one thing.
Yeah.
There's too many there's too many intricate parts, there's too many revolving pieces for it to ever be that clean.
That one.
But if it's a significant enough piece, if you go back to that moment in your past life and you start to integrate it, you can heal that part of yourself that's tapping into that panic, to
Yes.
that fear. And then you can work from that point to kind of unweave the trauma that you've been holding onto from that point. And especially, let's say the trauma began in 2000, that's still 23 years of holding on to this panic, that you've probably accumulated your own stuff
That's exactly
around
right.
it.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right. I so resonate with that. It feels like to me, in my experience and my intuition, it's all of these different variables, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I look at what was going on in my life in 2000 and I don't want to get into the details, but there was a lot that felt out of control and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
unprocessed grief and fear that I was holding. And then situationally, with my nervous system being so dysregulated, that was one variable, as well
Mm-hmm.
as the variable of my own moments and episodes of trauma from my childhood and the way that I move through the world. You're talking about your son being sensitive. I'm super sensitive. And then if I'm starting to tackle those things, but there also is this variable of the past life that is an integral part of it that is also activated, but I'm not addressing it. This just feels like such an important course to investigate
Right.
and to clear. So folks, what happened was she offered, because of this, to do this. Would you call it a soul journey, a soul clearing, a past life? Like, tell me what the nomenclature is.
I did. So, what I offer, I call it a soul journey.
Okay.
I go in and I have no idea what's going to happen when we go in. So, what I do is I call in your spirit, to meet me in a very sacred space. It's like being in meditation, and this is all in my mind's eye. So, I close my eyes and I call in your spirit, and I can see us, and it plays out in my head like a movie. And so, for those listening, this is what I offered. Um, so I record, because it's happening like a movie. I record everything I see, and then when I'm done, I send the recording, to the person I'm working on so that they can listen back. Now, it's can sometimes be a little confusing until you experience it, and then you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense, and this,
Yes.
everyone seems to really love this process, once they receive it. But what I do is I invite your spirit in, and um I clear your field so we're kind of on neutral ground, and then I ask for whatever is that we're trying to journey about. And for you, we wanted to go back and see if there were anything, and I focused on specifically guiding us towards past lives because we
Mhm.
had talked about it.
Right.
Now, there's a world where we could go back again and again and check other aspects of it, maybe your inner child, maybe any ancestral stuff. But we focused on past life. So I suggested to our guides that we move towards anything in the past life that would be connected to this panic that you're feeling going over a bridge. And that's when, I start seeing the images. So I was pulled into, two past lives
Mm-hmm.
for you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and the way that they happen is I start seeing like like a movie role
Real.
playing
Yeah, like a movie reel.
playing out in my head, and I'm describing it to you as it's happening.
Right. Right. So yes, as you're listening, I knew that she was going to do it at some point yesterday, but I didn't know when. It wasn't like she was doing it and I felt it. She was talking to my guides and to my subconscious, and she sends me the message over WhatsApp, and she's explaining what she has seen. So what I really appreciated is like, okay, when you listen, don't drive, maybe do the dishes, clean your house, do something so that, you know, you're not necessarily falling asleep, which is okay too. But, but for me, I was just lying in bed and I was tired, which is actually a good thing. And I'm listening to you recount these two past lives. One is of a woman, and then the second one was of a man. And so the woman, I'll just do the high level and then maybe I have some questions.
Yeah.
What I heard you say was, I'm not necessarily seeing you on a bridge. I'm seeing you from a vantage point where you were not looking out my eyes, but you can see that I'm standing next to someone and a dam has broken. And my children and my husband, almost like I think you said, it's almost like a tsunami, were just
Yeah.
swallowed up by this wall of water, this tsunami. And I'm watching the people I love the most die in front of me. And I collapse to my knees. And the person next to me isn't getting what is happening or what I'm seeing. And I'm so enveloped in just agony, anguish. And the person is like, no, 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 it's fine, sort of denying it.
Yeah. She did not realize, she thought you just knew your family was there, but she saw what was happening, but she didn't understand why you would think your family was
Hmm.
there. And so I don't know the whole background to what led up to that point,
Yeah.
but there was a reasoning why it wouldn't quite make sense for your family to be on there, but you knew. Like there was like a
Um,
maternal instinct of like you hear about where like something will happen and someone will be like, "Oh my gosh, like my, you know, like there's something happens on a plane and someone's like, I know someone on the plane, but they didn't know for sure. You know what
yeah,
I
I
mean? Like
do.
when you've had that feeling but you don't know, and that's what you were feeling. Like you just
I just
knew
knew.
and you were so connected, and it was just an instant feeling of like loss
Mm.
and this and really deep grief of like I'm never going to see you again. Like it was just you could just that was just the I didn't get to say goodbye. It was, you know, deeply sad.
Yeah.
I oftentimes unfortunately when we do these past lives, you know, most of the past lives that I'm going back to are not
Not
like I'm
happy.
sure everyone has lived really
Yeah.
amazing, beautiful, fabulous past lives, but that's not the ones I'm going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to the ones with heartache and trauma and maybe shame and
Hmm.
stickiness and that kind of stuff because that's the thing that we need to pull you back from.
Yes.
We need to unhook your soul because it was so deeply traumatizing that experience for you in that life that you fragmented off and a piece of you stayed there like unwilling to accept what was happening
Yeah.
and stayed on watching that scene over and over
Oh,
and over
God.
again and so when you described the way you felt in 2000 around the time that these symptoms showed up for you know it sounds to me like you there was a perfect alignment to open up a portal into your past life
Yeah.
because you were already tapping into some grief. You were already tapping
Hmm.
into some big emotions that felt maybe overwhelming at times. And so you were able to when our it's almost like our boundaries can collapse at times and that's when other time they call it like other timelines so that a past life is another timeline.
Yeah.
That's when our other timelines start seeping into this timeline, and so it can get a little um, messy. It starts to know what's happening in this life and what's happening in other lifetimes. And so that's why we have to really work on strengthening our boundaries. But when this happens, the best thing to do is call that piece of you back home. And that's what we
Mm.
did. So in this, once we witnessed and allowed her space to grieve,
Yes.
we offered that version of you a healing. And we even offered her the opportunity to say goodbye
See,
because that's
this
what she really
that's
wanted.
what she really wanted. I want to stay here because
Mhm.
in your episodes, you've made such a point of saying and emphasizing so much. We need to metabolize our feelings. And
Yeah.
this feels so linked to this. Like she is stuck, repeating, perseverating, replaying this without allowing the grief to move through her. And then I'm
Yeah.
wondering, this is a weird question. I mean, this is all just so sort of mind bending. So I hope this
Mhm.
makes sense. But oh, I don't even know how to explain this. So what I continually hear is that this idea of past lives, current lives, future lives, on the other side, there is no timeline. They're almost like con- concurrently happening, like they're
Yeah.
right. And so, is
Yeah.
there a part of her, because she and I share the same soul, that is
Yeah.
aware that her quote unquote future life, her soul that is occupying different lifetimes, or even me, Kristin, this lifetime, is bearing witness to her and that she feels heard? Or is there something you can say about my relationship to her or this process that you're doing with her?
I just got chills because I've actually never thought of it that way, but that is exactly what we do. We always have you, I always have you there because it's not, so I'm there bearing witness. I always have you, Kristin, there with whoever your other soul lifetime is.
Yeah.
And we're there. Like, and sometimes I'll have people comforting their person. Like, in
Yeah.
yeah, so that is what it is. There is an aspect of it that has to play out of just needing to be seen and heard often and
Mm-hmm.
understood and loved in that moment
Mm.
in order to shift out of that frozen space.
Yeah, that frozen
The
space.
looping. Yeah.
The looping, it's like it keeps rewinding to the same thing and she's stuck and she's stuck and she's stuck. It's so interesting what comes up for me too as I'm listening to this is shortly after I had my son, um, he was 5 pounds. He was 3 weeks early. He first week of his life was in the
Me
NICU.
too.
Oh, and so
Really proud
they
to hear
just
that.
look so vulnerable and your whole world is to care for this child. And it really triggered a lot of anxiety for me. And often when I would need to sleep, my husband would take him on a drive because then Jack would sleep. But him taking him on a drive brought up anxiety for me. I'm like,
Yes.
don't leave. And he's like, we're going to be fine. And I'm like, but what if I lose you and my son? Like it brought up all of this. And I'm just now going back to that thinking, well, yes, it's like that's a sticky place that portal
Yes.
perhaps was opened because the anxiety was not, I didn't see other mothers freaking out when their husbands put their son in the carrier in the car seat and would leave. I was like pacing the house. I'm like, I'm not sleeping, you know?
Yeah. I mean, yes, that makes there's these pivotal moments where we are often gifted the opportunity to heal aspects of ourselves. And sometimes in the opportunity to heal, that feels so painful that we miss the opportunity to heal. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's like we're so focused on how this is painful that we don't, because what was happening is there's probably little moments where you could have um where you're given the opportunity to kind of grieve that feeling of loss and separation
In separation.
in these moments. And so, and no, by no fault of your own, but maybe sometimes you chose not to do that, and so you had to, and so you were kind of accumulating the pain,
That's the
which
perfect
is what we
word.
do.
Yeah, it's accumulation of the pain and it
Yeah.
feels so overwhelming. I feel like I just kept swallowing it and holding it. And so, what I'd love to do is go back to this woman because I want to learn about her. Here you are watching this
Yeah.
movie, and before we started recording, you said sometimes you're inside them, so to speak, looking out their eyes at their world. But for her, you saw her. Can you tell me both a little bit about her, what you picked up, as well as the process where you're helping her sort of complete this cycle of grief?
Right.
What can you say?
So, um, my guides show me different things, and I don't always know why they show me different things. So,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I figure it out later, but there I get shown very specific things. So, with her, I was shown what she looked like. I don't always see features and stuff, but I remember her skin being olive, her hair was like really dark, um, shiny and long, and she was tall. And I don't know how tall you are, but she's
5'1.5".
5'1". Okay, yeah, she was taller. She was like maybe 5'11" or
Tall.
something. She was tall. And she had like a really graceful presence to her. Um, and 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 that's what they were showing. I mean, they were showing me these aspects of her. And again, like I don't know why I needed to know what her hair looked like, but I was seeing these qualities of her.
Mhm.
Which when we talk about the next life, I wasn't seeing these qualities. I was seeing more of a story. Um, so when I was shown her collapsing, and I don't even know if it was a friend or if it was like a neighbor that just happened to be there to help support her, or not support her. The neighbor was not necessarily in the wrong, um, but like she was wrong. but
Yeah.
she but she was like, what, she was kind of like, what is, like, she was kind of like, oh my gosh, you're making a scene, like what, I'm, the dam broke, this is very upsetting, but like you need to calm down, like
Mm.
everything's going to be fine. She was like trying to calm her down, and there was like, she was a little like she was being irrational or just like
Yeah.
crazy or whatever. And but clearly that's not the case. And so what I saw, that normally what I do is I clear the person's field. So I offer a clearing, just like I would offer a clearing for you. So I ground them. I pull any energies out of their field that they're no longer needed. Um, and I just kind of give them space to kind of come back and collect themselves from whatever the trauma. Because usually when they're looping in the trauma, they're just so focused on something. So I kind of get them to sit until they're almost brought into awareness that that time has passed.
Mm.
And but with her, I couldn't do that until I kept hearing I couldn't say goodbye.
Mm.
And I've never experienced this before, but in this time I saw the spirits of her children coming to say goodbye to her. That was so um so she needed to say goodbye to them. So she sat and just held this, like, what looked like spirits to me. Um I remember there being a boy. I think there were two girls. There were three children and the husband. And yeah, and I'm sure these spirits probably still show up in your life. We often have, especially when in these sticky moments, I often see the people showing up in that, and
I just
they
got
probably showed up in
chills.
your life in another way, right? So once I allowed her space to say goodbye, she could finally like take a breath,
Mm.
and then she was able to grieve. And so we just kind of sat there and held space for her. We just sat there and witnessed her grieving, and allowed her to grieve without intervening or slowing the process, just letting it out and and she had a lot of grief she was holding on to, so we're just letting it all move. And then once that felt like lighter, I could see her kind of coming around, like, okay, now what's next? Like, and that tells me that she's ready to kind of integrate. Like, she's like, oh, okay, I'm not stuck in this moment, I can accept it and move on. And so I like to always clear karma, especially when there's other people involved. And there were the souls that were lost that day, even the neighbor that was kind of misunderstanding her, not understanding, or not able to understand her in that
Yeah.
moment. There was just a lot of things kind of playing out, and then I clear any soul contracts she have been holding on to. Because when I integrate her back into you, I don't want her to bring all that baggage, right?
Yeah.
She will bring with her pieces of of your soul's essence that has been missing from you. What happens is when we integrate the souls, we're bringing in a piece of us that would felt like a gap in our field.
Mm.
And so you're becoming more whole the
Wow.
more you bring in these fragments back in.
Wow.
I know for me, when I do soul integrations, I feel more solid as a person. I just
Mm-hmm.
feel like sturdier,
Mm-hmm.
and it feels really great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's what we did, and what I found that was interesting is when we were bringing her in, because your frame is so small and she was so tall.
Yeah.
It was so funny because I was like, oh, like I've never seen this before, which is maybe why they were showing me what she looked like. But when we were bringing her in, she had to kind of like
Compress
shrink
herself
down
down.
to get into your body.
Oh, that's so
And
funny.
what was interesting by that is that it was like she took up so much space that it forced you to release even more stuff. So you were at that point I saw you almost like purging aspects of that were not yours, but you were holding space for in your space, and there was no room for anyone else but what was actually you. And since
Wow.
she's a part of you, you had to make room for her. So you were
Mm.
releasing more. And it was really beautiful.
Oh gosh, that is beautiful. That's beautiful. So, is there anything I should be doing to continue to integrate and to move towards my healing as an awareness of this on my side of this? Like,
I think what she was showing us was anywhere where, and this is a tricky subject around loss, sudden loss, and I don't know if you've ever experienced it,
mhm,
um or if you have a fear of experiencing
I
it.
do.
But there's no way around it. It is a painful
Yep.
experience. And I think what she was showing us is that not facing it, I mean, not being willing to accept it only causes more
Yeah, I'm
harm.
getting chills.
And so we have to sit in it.
Mm-hmm.
It is often not as painful if we're willing to sit and face
Yeah.
it than we imagine it to be. And it is definitely more painful if we resist it.
Yes.
So, really kind of allowing yourself to see areas, even when those memories of like your son being in the NICU come up, it's not too late to go back to that moment and sit with that part of you and accept that he had to be in the NICU
Mm-hmm.
and that you might have had to be separated from him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was deeply painful.
Yes.
And even something as going back to the part where your husband took him for a drive and that feeling, that
Yes.
panic of pacing the house,
Yes.
being with that part of you and allowing yourself to grieve
That makes sense.
the separation.
That makes sense because that anxiety until they got home and I saw my husband take the car seat from the back seat and bring it in and I could touch my son and touch him like it was I knew it was disproportional to the situation, but yeah. Okay. Okay, this is great. Um there was another person that you met.
Yes. So I what I was like wrapping as I was wrapping up her story and integrating her into you, I see a man driving at night over a bridge and in one of those old
Model T.
Model T. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
It was like a Model T car,
Hmm.
and um, the the actual it was at the time of his death. And so the actual death was a little choppy, which makes sense because I'm seeing it from multiple perspectives. I'm watching it happen. I'm seeing from his perspective, I'm watching it happen. So there was a lot of moving parts in there, so it wasn't super smooth. But what I understand, it was nighttime. The tire, there was a flat tire, something wrong with the tire. He got out of the car and I see like headlights turning onto the bridge. And then I know that him in the car. So I don't know if he had gotten back in the car, but the car goes over the bridge. Like he gets
He
hit,
gets hit.
and he goes over the
Yeah.
bridge, and and he dies. So what is that story? Well, what I was feeling is I needed to look to what he was feeling going before he entered the bridge. I was like, what does he feel? And it wasn't a strong feeling. It was like almost like a really normal feeling. It was like a very normal feeling that can happen with in families or in marriages. This kind of, uh, like, what am I going to go home to? That was like a feeling he had. Like,
Mm.
and I was looking to see why. And I saw, well, what was he doing the moments before? And I tracked back, and he was delivering a baby. And it was so I realized you're a doctor and you were delivering a baby at someone's home, and it was so beautiful and joyous, and you were proud of yourself and you were happy in that moment. So I was confused what was going on, and so I looked ahead at your home life, and I saw kind of a sad, lonely home. It was your wife who, my understanding that was coming forward was that she could not get pregnant and she was having a hard time. And the fact that you were a doctor that delivered babies made it very challenging for her.
Yeah.
Every time you would um, be called to deliver a baby, she would it was like it would just bring up that pain, and
Yeah.
she started to like get sour about it.
Mhm.
And so and this felt like it had been going on for a while. And so it was almost like you kind of were coming down from delivering this baby. You were hit this bridge was right before you get to your house. So you start to go over this bridge, and then you feel, oh, I'm going to go home and she's going to be sour about,
Bad mood and resentful,
yeah,
and then you
and
have
I'm
to.
gonna, yeah, um and not even sad. I think it had moved past that. Like it was just
Bitter.
bitter about the experience. And so you kind of were just feeling like and then this happened with your, and then you went over something, the tire blew, and so it kind of all happened so fast. But there was a moment where I also felt you go, oh, I didn't get to say goodbye.
Mm.
So it was similar, but it was from the other perspective of you feeling like you left with, there wasn't a completion
Yeah.
to what, like it just didn't, you didn't get to complete. And so it's like you kept going back to that space where you were entering the bridge and just like kind of seizing up, holding your breath, not wanting to go over the bridge.
So going over the bridge to face this bitter wife. So that was a moment.
Yeah.
And then the death was instantaneous. That was like not the big part of the story. So the
Right.
part of.
Well, I think what happened with the death made it so you couldn't complete it.
Yeah.
You weren't completing it though. There was a lot of avoidance that was happening that would lead you to a space where your wife was experiencing this, and then you, if you were in this space, there was a lot of opportunities. It wasn't like you didn't have the opportunity to work through it, but maybe that wasn't tools in your toolbox at that time. I mean, this was a long time ago.
Yeah.
Communication probably wasn't as effective or clear.
Yeah.
It's not even that clear nowadays. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah. So, but it was such a different. It was almost like watching from the opposite side of like, we saw how your family, or how you in the previous past life, we saw how she felt that loss instantaneously, and how she didn't get to say goodbye, and now we're seeing it from the opposite side. But this felt more like he didn't get to complete, he didn't get to finish. So it was just kind of this like held space of not completing.
Yeah. Well, I'm hearing not completing his life, but I'm also hearing that this tension, this rift between he and his wife
Yeah.
never was resolved. And so
Right.
not only did he not get to say goodbye to her, but his passing happened in the midst of unresolved conflict.
Yeah.
And
And that was I think he just, there was a feeling of like, There was something about him that felt very positive, like this will all work out. And it was a little bit of like, oh,
Oh,
it didn't happen.
it didn't happen as I
And
thought it
then,
would.
yeah,
Like it didn't all just sort of clear up,
right.
and I didn't. If I just ignored it, it'd all just sort of,
Yeah,
all just be all okay, but it wasn't okay.
right.
Okay.
This is also a lesson in just facing. I mean, this is just a lot more of just like
Yeah.
facing what's happening in the moment and allowing the feelings to kind of come through and metabolize.
Yes.
Um, this was also just like a really normal. It felt everything about it felt like a really normal experience. Like it
Mm-hmm.
felt like, but even in the normalcy of it, it felt like there was some part of your soul that didn't like the suddenness of it. And so there was like,
It's trauma.
so similar to the, yeah,
It's trauma.
of just like, yeah,
Yeah, it's trauma. And so these lessons that I'm learning, and the reason I'm wanting to share this with anyone, everyone who's listening, is so that they understand the process. Um, so what I'm taking from my side is I'm looking at, okay, the lessons of this woman, right? That we need to be able to process our grief fully. And for me, going back to even that moment of my husband taking my son on a drive, to be able to revisit that and metabolize the fear and the anxiety so it's not just accumulating, to use your words. And so for this gentleman, it's also this idea of not avoiding. If there's conflict or there's tension, not just sort of, it'll get better, because
right,
it might not unless we face it head on. It was really
yeah,
interesting last night. I went to my son's football game with my brother and my mom and my husband, and it was this really intense moment in the game where it could go one way or the other. I think it was like 12-14. It was the fourth quarter, and I'm not a football person, so bear with me here. But they pulled him in to punt, and
hmm,
so it's this intense moment of everyone is looking at my little sensitive, here I am, little sensitive baby. Who's a football player on the football field who hates all eyes on him. It really is this anxious kid. And I said out loud, this is where I dissociate.
yeah,
And now that that was less than 24 hours ago, and my brother was like, no, you can't dissociate. This is when you have to be fully present to the experience.
that's
And that's
true.
like so perfect for this,
Yeah,
because the vicarious experience of seeing him in anxiety and also loving him so much and feeling the pressure of like, okay, he's about to like grab that ball, catch that ball, drop kick it, and let's see what happens as everyone's charging him. The metaphors are abundant here. And I want to dissociate. I want
I
to
know.
dissociate. So to metabolize and really be there for the feeling
Yeah,
rather than my tendency with being sensitive throughout my life, especially as in childhood, is to dissociate and avoid. It's
yeah.
too scary. Just tap out.
But being able to hold space for your son in a big pivotal moment in a game or whatever for him is the most powerful thing you can do, and not to diminish how hard that is.
Yeah.
It is extremely hard and it takes work. And so if you're not able to do it, if you weren't able to do it last night, then that's fine. But also knowing that that's something you want to build towards,
Yes.
and that being aware of it is the first step of it.
Right.
What I will say is I can give you a couple of tools for metabolizing emotions
Great.
to be a little bit more present.
Yes, please.
This is what I tell my clients. I have a little bit of a formula that has come through. And the way, and it works also with little children too.
Mm-hmm.
This is why this is how it's helpful because it works with my son. So they're always, if you ever hear like parenting sites always say, when your child is upset, repeating back to them instead of trying to fix it,
Yes.
right? Repeating back to them, I don't like this. You didn't like that. You didn't like that.
Yeah.
You didn't expect it and you didn't like it. Like that is like such a those are two powerful things to say. You
Yes.
didn't expect this and you didn't like it, because that's often where we go into freeze, resistance,
Mm-hmm.
want to jump out of our bodies, all that
Yes.
stuff,
Yes.
association. So learning to say that for yourself,
Mm-hmm.
saying it, even if you have to say it in your head, you're allowed to say when your son is all eyes on him and you know this might be stressful for him or intimidating or whatever, you're allowed to say, I don't like this. This doesn't feel good in my body. This doesn't feel good in my heart. I
Yeah.
don't like this.
Yeah.
You're allowed to say that because skipping that step is where we get in trouble. It's where
Yeah.
we, when we want to pretend everything's fine or whatever, that's when we get into trouble with ourselves. So just accepting it, like having a space where you allow bring awareness to how you're feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
you can naming. So that's what, so my first part of my formula is bringing awareness to it, just letting it be, sitting with it, pausing, not trying to fix it.
Right.
'Cause- so just letting it be messy or icky or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you move into accepting it. This is happening. He's
Mm-hmm.
going out there, he's doing this, and I'm sitting here and I'm safe and he's safe, and like naming it, naming the
Yes.
qualities of it, and just allowing the energy to keep flowing. Don't
Mm-hmm.
try to, can't stop it. This
Yeah.
can't happen. It is happening,
Yeah.
right?
Or do what I did in that moment. And I said it jokingly, like dissociate, but stay with it.
Yeah, stay with it.
Mm-hmm.
And then bringing later when you want to deal with the emotions around it, the really important part of once we experience something that we don't like and we need to like start to metabolize it is once we have allowed ourselves to accept it, we have to forgive it. We
Mm.
have to forgive the experience. Maybe we forgive our reactions to it. Maybe we have to forgive others. Oftentimes, though, when it's our emotions, it's mostly we have to forgive
That's
ourselves
right.
because it's usually us that has stopped it.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if you want to look back at the time you were pacing back and forth with when your husband took your son on the drive, you can forgive yourself for that reaction. Like forgive yourself for being panicked and not taking care of your needs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
It's
from
powerful.
that point, when you're forgiving, then you need to, once you feel like you've forgiven and you've accepted, then sitting in that space and filling yourself with love.
Yeah.
Like loving yourself so much, finding all the ways in which you have met your needs haven't been met, and filling it with pockets of love. And maybe you bring in like love from the earth or love from the cosmos or from God or however you want
Yeah.
to envision it, and bringing that love in to fill those spaces. Because what's happened is when we have resisted or when we're processing this emotion, we're usually replacing whatever emotion with love. Like love is being replaced with whatever
That's
emotion.
right.
So we have fear instead of love, or we have anger instead of love, or whatever. So we need to fill the love back in. Now that we're willing to metabolize these emotions and let them go, we have to fill back in with something. So we're
Yeah.
going to fill back in with love.
It's so good.
And then from love, we move in, and only after you're in the space of love and your cup feels flowing and you're feeling overflowing, then you can be grateful for the situation.
Yeah.
And I will say that oftentimes I hear people say to do gratitude and be grateful. And I think that a lot of times that message is delivered incorrectly, because you cannot be grateful from an empty cup.
That's
Because
right.
to me, great gratitude is a magnifier and a multiplier. So if you're faking gratitude,
Mm.
if you're empty or like, oh, I should be grateful, and you're coming from that space, you're going to magnify the anxiety. You're going to magnify the fear. You don't want that. So hold off on gratitude. It's not going anywhere. Fill yourself with love, forgiveness, acceptance. Do all that work first. Metabolize that energy, that emotion. Make sure it's out of your field,
Yeah.
and then be great. Then you're just grateful. Then you're
Yeah.
automatically grateful. You're like, whoa, I don't feel this anymore. I don't feel this pain or this anxiety or this fear. I'm so grateful. And then that's where that when people talk about how gratitude changed their life and opened up doors, that's because they're talking because they've experienced it from a place filled with love.
Yes. God, that's so powerful, Christina. That's so, so powerful. It's interesting. I follow a woman for years. She's a Buddhist practitioner and psychologist. Her name is Tara Brach. And
Mm-hmm.
she has a framework called RAIN. And it's the mindfulness practice of self-compassion to emotionally regulate. And it's very, very similar to what you're saying. The
Oh, okay.
R is recognize, give it a name. And there's a study out of UCLA. It's called affect labeling. Simply by virtue of giving emotions, plural, because there are often many and nuanced, names, it really goes far towards emotional regulation.
Yes.
The A is allow. Don't resist.
Yes.
Allow. And show up with the allowing with neutrality and curiosity. And there
Yeah.
are two branches to that. One is, what is the story I'm telling myself? Let me just check into that story. And where do I feel it in my body?
Yes.
That's the investigate. That's I.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Where do I feel it in my body? What's the story? And then the N is nurture. How do I show up
Mm,
in self-compassion? Instead of saying, why is this happening? It's saying, what do I need? And let that
yeah.
answer be infused with deep, deep love.
Yes.
But what I love about yours is like, you can't just jump to gratitude, which I know I've done so many times because it's what we're told to do. But it's inauthentic and it's actually sending
Yeah.
out really bad energy, which then is just going to be multiplied, as you said. That's so brilliant.
So when I do use this formula and I when I get to a pocket, so let's say I tap into, I'm like, okay, I've accepted it. I'm ready to do my forgiveness. And when I go to do forgiveness, if it feels inauthentic, if it feels
Mm.
fake, if it feels like I'm trying, then I'm like, I haven't fully accepted it. So I always have to go back
Yeah.
to the previous
Oh
one.
my God, I
And
needed
and
to hear
same for
this.
each of the steps.
I needed
Yeah.
to hear this so badly, and I am very certain other people do too. And it's if I haven't fully accepted this, for me, it's like either this part of myself or this part of this other person. We want to
Yes.
bypass so quickly to like forgiveness. That's benevolent. It's the right spiritual thing to do. But if you're holding on and there's still resentment and you haven't accepted it and
Yeah.
experienced that, it's just
And
like phoning it
acceptance
in.
can be the acceptance can be the hardest part. I mean, people think
Yes.
that forgiveness, but acceptance is like, let's say you're feeling jealousy. There's so many people that will be like, oh, they don't want to associate themselves. I don't,
I'm not
what am I jealous
jealous. I'm
of?
not
Like,
a
we don't want to
jealous
be jealous
person.
of anything.
Yeah, because it's this
But
identity
everyone,
thing. I'm not
yes,
jealous.
right. And but jealousy is such a beautiful emotion. We all have capacity for it.
Hmm.
And if you don't, then you're denying yourself of an important tool because jealousy allows us to scan something and be like, "Oh, I want
I want
that."
that.
And we are not capable of being jealous of something that we don't have the possibility of having for ourselves. So it's
Yeah.
a clue in what we are have the capacity for.
This is gold.
So jealousy is should be so that and I mean every so I'm always grateful for when jealousy comes onto my radar and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes.
But first I have to like work through the emotions around it. And of course every emotion has its negative side. If you're only stuck in the negativity of it, it can ripple out and it can cause harm. But when you're actively metabolizing emotions, if you're accepting it, you're not oh, I forgot there's another part. So a lot of people have a hard time with some of these more negative idea of around emotions like maybe greed or being greedy or being jealous or whatever. So they
Vengeful
try to
or,
deny
yeah, that's not me. That's
even
the shadow work they're not doing.
right.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, once you accept it and you move along, once at the very end, after you're grateful for this jealousy to coming on your radar, being or feeling greedy about something, and it's coming on your radar, then you can. Then I like to add in accountability. How do I want to? What do I want? How do I vision myself doing it different next time? How
Yes.
can I? So if I was feeling jealous and I maybe was like talked bad about the person because I because I was trying to make myself feel
Yeah.
better or something,
Yeah.
right? Then I would be like, okay, how about next time I catch myself before I say something negative, and I just switch it around in my head of like, wow, that's amazing for them. I
Mm-hmm.
want that too, and own it in myself.
Mm.
And then so we start to shift into accountability at the end of like, what can we do differently next time? Because there also has to be growth in this.
Yes.
So you're metabolizing emotions, you're filling up with, you're forgiving yourself, you're filling up with love, you're being grateful for this kind of experience of this lesson and how it came through, and then you have the opportunity to change it. How do you want to change your relationship to it
Mm. God, this is
going
this is like deep seminar workshop. This is
forward? I
deep,
know.
deep work. It's so good. It's so important. And I think so many of us aren't doing it and we're caught in
Mhm.
repeating patterns. And if you're looking at the law of attraction or however we want to define that, and then we're attracting the shadow side of us that it hasn't been processed and all the traumas go in the driver's seat. And then we look around
Yeah.
saying, but I'm doing my work. And why is this? I'm choosing gratitude and I'm choosing forgiveness when we're actually just kind of phoning it in. We're saying it, but it's not authentic. And I'm saying this
I
because I have done this.
I have too. I have too.
It's,
My one of my clients actually helped me call it because I channeled this formula. This came into a she had asked me a question about her process, and then this answer came through very clearly, and I've been practicing it with clients since. But she said something like, I keep getting this, she kept having this feeling, reoccurring feeling like she was bad. She was like a bad person. She was failing. And then I was like, well, she was like, and I can't get rid of it. And I was like, well, walk me through your process of, she was like, I'm trying to sit with it and accept it. And I was like, well, walk me through your process. And she was like, okay, well, I sit there and I tell myself I'm not bad. And then I say, I'm grateful for the reminder. And then
ding,
she was
ding.
like, and then I try to like let it go. And I was like, oh,
That's
okay.
not how you do
We
it.
are missing, we're missing so many steps here. There's
Yes.
like you're identifying it sort of, but then you're skipping right to it, gratitude, and there's none of the stuff in between,
Yeah.
and all the stuff in between is that's the juicy stuff, and that's really how we make room for change.
Yeah, because it's one thing to say metabolize your emotions, and that sounds like a great phrase, but
Yeah, but
how?
how do you do it?
How do you do
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
And then I had another client that when I brought up greed, it was it felt so uncomfortable. Like she did not want to be associated with it, and she's the one that helped me understand that I had to add accountability at the end. Until I added accountability, she wasn't willing to accept that she could be greedy
Mm.
because she didn't want to be like, she didn't want to just sit with the idea of being greedy, but she was willing to sit with the idea of being greedy if she knew that they're at the end of the tunnel of this processing, that she could be like, now I'm going to do something different. I can make
Yes.
conscious efforts to change.
Yes.
And so it's so
God.
sweet. I mean, there's all, it's such a
Yeah.
sweet approach, but it's also okay. It's okay to be greedy too, because you know what that means? That means you're putting your attention on yourself. And a lot of times we're told that things are bad when they're not.
Yes.
And we're really just being put in a position where we need to like focus on ourselves, and that's okay.
Yeah, the guilt and the shame that can come up when we are
Yeah.
focusing on ourselves and then we demonize or vilify these aspects of ourselves. That's why the shadow work is so important to be able to touch those places. Otherwise, they will start to take control as we subconsciously
And
move through the world.
this is my shadow work formula.
Oh, it's
So you
so
have
good. It's so so good. Thank you. This is like gold. I just love it so much. We are basically at time. I just want to say to those listening, it's one thing to listen and go, oh, okay, that's Kristin's experience. But I do want to share from the inside. Even yesterday and today, a couple of challenging things have come up in my life. I mean, nothing big, but just, parenting and, marriage and time and energy. And I feel greater equanimity. I don't feel triggered. And I think there's some processing that's already starting to take place as that portal was opened. And as, in particular, I'm hearing that woman, bearing witness to her grieving. And trying to think of your words, but that it's more integrated without that place of trauma.
Yes.
Right? That it's starting to feel more resolved. So I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for the generosity of your time and your talents and your gifts and your angels and spirit guides, and mine as well. But that you really initiated something very powerful and healing, and I will just forever be grateful.
Oh, you're welcome. It was so fun, and it was such a beautiful experience.
Oh, thank you. And so, as always, especially because now people have gotten a more than a glimpse into how important your work is and how much depth and wisdom you bring, how do people reach out to you? Where can they find you?
You can find me on my website, Soul Journey with Christina, and Instagram, which I don't use as often, but I'm starting back after my summer break.
Okay.
Which is also Soul Journey with Christina.
Great.
At Soul Journey with Christina.
Okay, good. Well, we're going to have you on again, so this is not goodbye forever. It's goodbye for right now. So much gratitude for you. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you.
How I Made It Through is produced and distributed by EIQ Media, LLC. Elevate your emotional IQ with podcasts and content focused on overcoming adversity, leadership, mental health, entrepreneurship, spiritually transformative experiences, and more.